comes from a fact that Gladys read on the paper. A young Italian immigrant mother was found dead, and her baby was still alive when they found her in her very humble abode. He honored at the same time two doctors of Buenos Aires, a guy in the center scene, and this other one are historical characters, and these two doctors died during the epidemic. So, in other words, it was his homage to these two healers of the epidemic. And as they appear in the novel, the young British doctor and his wife, who are fictional, of course, they are attending this exposition, and they're very, very moved, very emotional about, like any people there that was attending that event, sensitized by the image of the tree. It's the most iconic historical image, and of course we could go on and on, but then there's an allusion to immigration, to social classes, lyrical allusion to the immigrants that, like I said before, were targeted, were like scapegoats, after people who lived in the north of the city. And to this day, the north of the city is where the upper social classes reside in Buenos Aires. I think I'm reaching the end of my exposition here, and I would be happy to answer any questions later on. And I hope I give you an idea of my work on the subject. And thank you very much. And then we are going to move on to Dr. Zema Catalan from Sofijski Universitet, Climate. Okay, that's right. Okay. She's going to present on By Jove. It's the Cook, National Stereotypes as Narrative Capital in Dickens and Thackeray.
Can you hear me? I have no idea. Yes.
You want to use it?
No. I prefer a stationary one. I just wanted to first to say thankful for being invited to this conference. It's an honor, a pleasure to be among old and new friends and colleagues, and it has been a challenge to look at familiar texts from a new perspective. So, in Dickens is Our Mutual Friend, Mr. Podsnap expounds on the superiority of England and the English nation before a baffled foreign guest, French-speaking and most probably French. How do you like London? Podsnap begins by asking, quote, as if you were administering something in the nature of a powder or potion to the deaf child. London, Londres, I suppose he says. London. End of quote. Starting with this ostensibly trivial question, Podsnap goes on to extol the superior advantages of his country, and finally to proclaim that, quote, we Englishmen are very proud of our constitution, sir. It was bestowed upon us by Providence. No other country is so favored as this country. this island was blessed, sir, to the direct exclusion of such other countries as they may happen to be. The conceptual emphasis of Potsdam's complacent nationalism are graphically represented through capital letters, which trace its rising pitch. With his characteristic dexterity in the mode of satire, Dickens manages in the space of a page to make his Potsdam seen, heard, understood, and rejected. Potsdam is unquestionably a functional figure, an emblem of the phenomenon named after him, Potsdamery, a combination of narrow-mindedness, anti-intellectualism, and xenophobic dismissal of anything he does not know or he disapproves of as, I quote, not English. As is usual with such embodiments of the stereotypical British Philistine, Dickens exploits the full potential of language, even the graphic level. But Potsdam is not just an occasional, even if highly memorable caricature. His presence is subsequently remotivated and given significance when he indirectly becomes involved in one of the main plot lines and almost gets his comeuppance. Just as his rising pitch quickly melts and the capital letters disappear, as his argument stumbles against an intellectual complication, so his most precious capital, his daughter and personal epitome of the young person on whose cheek there should never come a blush, falls prey to dirty transactions between the mercenary landlords and the villainous usurer Fledgeby, who has set his eyes on her substantial dowry. Thus, through a conceptual transformation, the capitalization on the formal graphic level becomes transformed and assimilated into the narrative economy of the novel. And the fact that it is his daughter, rather than another character, who occasions these complications, indicates Dickens's awareness that the stereotype is highly charged with a dynamic potential. Each of Potsdam's brief appearances highlights his complete inability and refusal to understand otherness, as well as his own mental enclosure within his self-stereotype. In terms of the story then, Potsdam outgrows his marginality, as do the villains, both French by nationality, in Dickens's other two major novels of his mature period. They are Hortense, Lady Dedlock's French maid in Bleak House, and Rigaud in Little Dorrit. Similarly, Dickens's contemporary Thackeray chooses French characters to set going the conflict and the resulting plot complications in Pendennis and the Newcomes. I regard their presence and the role they play as an asset in their respective novels, the economy of cultural material. And in this paper I leave out A Tale of Two Cities and Vanity Fair. Following Luc Herrmann and Bart Verbeck's view of narrative interest as cultural negotiation, I want to argue that in these novels, the success of the transaction of literary and cultural values is guaranteed by the attention allotted to the characters' self-images in national terms, as well as by the juxtaposition of the French and English stereotypes in each other. By assets, Herrmann and Verbeck mean elements of dominant cultural material that enable the successful negotiation of cultural values between author, text, and reader. Based on the views of Stephen Greenblatt and Pierre Bourdieu, Herrmann and Verbeck argue that the narrative will be deemed interesting if there is homology between production and consumption. That is, if there is agreement between author and audience on the hierarchy of cultural values and the discourses which transmit them, even if the reader does not agree with the purpose for which they were originally promoted. The two authors, however, make the important qualification that such an agreement is possible only as long as there is also shared acceptance of the margins and parameters of a certain field, that is, of the semantics of the given topic, as well as of the specific structural features of the given genre. Yet the latter features, Herrmann and Verbeck go on to state, may conceal their essentially social nature and appeal in a purely literary disguise. In other words, I say, assets that are masked as purely aesthetic and culture, culture and ideology laden. This observation extends the definitions, in my opinion, offered by some leading narratologists, definitions of narrative interest, alternatively known as tellability. Narrative interest, tellability, has been formulated, for instance, by Marie Laure Ryle as newsworthiness or wow factor, an effect of surprise concerning the actor's possible moves in a situation. For Jerome Bruner, it resides in the breach of tacitly known, culturally propagated, and individually accepted canonical narratives. All of these are effective, I suggest, only when the assets are successfully exchanged and their value increased. And here is the use of the pun in the word interest. Increased by the powder of the aesthetic. And in this exchange, stereotypes are frequently and deliberately chosen as the basis of consensus, as the goal and the terminal point of the negotiation. The theoretical framework I have presented offers reasons to consider the use of nationally stereotypical characters as a particularly powerful asset in narrative fiction, and more specifically English fiction of the 19th century. Stereotypes, less than the rhetoric of national character, are well suited to an ironic treatment. But for their part, irony and parody are a staple of realism, which, as George Levine has influentially claimed, constantly defines itself against romance, its other, through intertextuality, irony, and parody. But there is another context in which the 19th century novel is also read in this light. Linda Coley has shown that the early decades of the 19th century are the summit point of the process of forging a British nation through the whole range of public discourses mobilized towards the establishment of this construct by way of distanciation from other nations, most notably the French. At the time when Dickens and Thackeray produced their mature works, the old stereotypes